Hello, virtual students, and welcome to my first of 3 workshops that I will have on the community of inquiry. Today is Monday, January the 23rd, and my name is Renee Schmitz. Today our class is going to last about 15 minutes as we talk about the history of the framework of community inquiry and how we're going to be able to incorporate that into an online health information management courses. As we go through the presentation, you're going to be asked to write down some things. So you'll actually need to send me at the end of this presentation via email. So I've provided you my email here. I also have placed it in the chat box for you, so you can copy it from there. Also, upon entering the room, it's very important that you click on the audio setup wizard. That icon is right here in the top left-hand corner of your screen. And if you haven't already done that, you'll want to go ahead and pause this so that you can go ahead and set that up. That way I know that you can hear me appropriately. Also, whenever you get done with that, when you normally come in the room, you're actually going to see that your hand is raised. And once you're done with the audio setup wizard, what I'd like for you to do is actually click on this icon right here by the number 2 and lower your hand. You'll want to get used to doing that because in our next classes or workshops that we have, they will be synchronous, so you'll want to know how to do that ahead of time. Before we go any further, I do want to make sure that I have my own quality check done. I do see the red record button is lit up. I have a check in the follow box, and I can also see that my microphone is working. And I just lost my other page here. Hold on just a second while I move it back up here where it belongs. Somehow when I double clicked it, it jumped a page. So what we're going to do now is actually remove any distractions. So if you want to take a second to turn off your phone, your email, maybe close your door, depending on where you're at. If you're watching this at home, maybe you want to let your family know not to disturb you. And if you need to pause the presentation, you're more than welcome to get all that done as you need to. Now that we have all the distractions removed, let's just take a moment to clear our minds. Take a deep breath, relax, and then let's get started. Our objectives for today are actually upon completion of this virtual classroom, you should be able to explain how e-learning is transforming teaching and learning. Name the 3 elements of the Community of Inquiry framework, and also describe 3 ways that you can make online courses more interactive in the health information management field. But the first thing I'd like to do is actually do an icebreaker. So what I'd like for you to do is to think about what e-learning means to you. How is it different from teaching from face-to-face, and are your students as engaged? I'm going to go ahead and put more, well again, I have my email down there in the chat box for you, and if you want to go ahead and pull that up so that you can send it to me at the end, go ahead and do so, or pause and set that up. But go ahead and think about that. Pause the presentation and type that in to your email for me. So the history of e-learning is transforming how we teach, as well as what, how, and when our students learn. So the current strive in higher education is to provide more opportunities of education using more of a cost-effective technology, all the while providing a quality educational experience, and e-learning is a way of achieving this goal. According to Garrison, Anderson, and Archer, e-learning is transforming how we teach as well as how our students actually learn. Combining pedagogy with the technology and being able to provide more educational opportunities to a vast number of students in an online fashion is initially, we're able to do that in an online fashion. Initially, e-learning was only asynchronous, reading recorded lectures and assessments just to determine a student's knowledge. It was basically placing a face-to-face course in an online fashion and removing much of the student engagement. So as part of their research, they found this method, and they found that this method of face-to-face, placing it online without engagement, had very little impact on their distance education or the e-learning portion. However, for an effective e-learning, we found that it should be a purposeful communication, one that lets students get to know each other, their teacher, the information being presented into the real world around them. Collaboration is actually key to the success of an online program, building this actual community of inquiry. One thing we want to remember and understand is that each class is different, so what works for one class may not work for another in exactly the same way. This is where the teacher or the facilitator of a course needs to be very creative and knowledgeable, and being able to necessitate an inquisitive student, one that actually wants to know or is willing to talk and learn. So pull up your email, and what I'd like for you to do is jot down what makes e-learning a more effective experience. Go ahead and pause the video while you answer that. This is actually a graph depicting the elements of the community of inquiry framework. In order to provide the student with an overall engaging and educational experience, we need to have all three elements of the community of inquiry. There must be a social presence, a cognitive presence, and a teaching presence. They all overlap, creating the whole theoretical framework of learning. And of course, ultimately, the educational experience. So let's go ahead and start with the social presence, this section right here. In Garrison's ebook, or book of e-learning for the 21st century, he finds that social presence involves the engagement of conversation, a student's ability to identify as part of a group. For this to happen, it needs to be a trusting environment, one where a student feels concern, respect. The challenge is actually found in the written text. So written text lacks an immediacy, and also it lacks the closeness of friendship or building conversations that evolve in a typical face-to-face classroom. So each teacher or instructor has a responsibility to set the learning climate, enabling a risk-free environment. Here, verbal engagement enables students the ability to develop acceptance, at the same time reducing possible risk during the critical conversations that they may need to have in order to develop the deeper understanding. As students are able to engage a higher level of cognitive learning, let me say that again. As students are able to engage, a higher level of cognitive learning is able to happen. So now what do you think? Go ahead and pull out your email again, pause the video, and write down if the challenge is found in the written text, how could you make the written text more of a risk-free environment for the student? Okay, so let's move on over to the cognitive presence, which is a section right here. Here in the cognitive presence, it's much more about how the student learns. Garrison, Anderson, and Archer discuss that this is where the students are actually able to develop new ideas and reflect on findings with other learners in a way of gaining a deeper level of knowledge about a given question, an idea, or even a problem. Discourse and reflection lead to a learner being able to critically think. It's basically a higher level of thinking and learning as an outcome. Again, discourse must be supported, and the teacher and the student regulate the learning. Again, what do you think? Think of a way that you may have experienced a cognitive presence with your students. Pause the video and then come back when you're finished. Last but not least, we have the teaching presence, which is this section right here. This is typically the one presence that's the most challenging overall in e-learning. Here the teacher is ultimately responsible for the development of the material, the design, the layout, and how to facilitate the subject matter by knowing our students and knowing their needs and their interest levels for the course. The focus is on engagement, be it high, low, too low, all are considered for the material or subject matter that's being taught in an online environment. As I mentioned before in the beginning, the teacher or the facilitator of the course needs to be very creative and knowledgeable in necessitating an inquisitive student. So once again, go ahead and pause the video and describe in your email why you think a teaching presence is critical to an online course. The big idea here is to not just place a face-to-face course in an online medium. In the HIM courses that we have an opportunity to, in many of our HIM courses, we have an opportunity to incorporate a more robust social presence. That one way that I can think of this is to add a synchronous component to each course, one that can be done in place of a lesson. It could be done in a discussion forum or even for an entire class time. Adding a synchronous class, one that's where you have students actually in the class being able to have that real time with the teacher will help. It's something that we need to be able to do in an HIM program. We have a lot of technical courses that the students would only benefit from. For a teaching presence, we need to look at the design. For teaching presence, we need to look at the design of our courses and how we facilitate that design and organize our content. And for a cognitive presence, we could incorporate a trigger for each lesson that hooks our students, and then as they exchange information on what they've learned, they can then have discussions and this deeper discourse that let them apply the ideas of what they are seeing and learning in order to work on resolving a problem themselves. So let's go over our objectives one more time. We've actually talked about how e-learning is transforming teaching and learning. We've talked about the three elements of the community of inquiry framework, and we've actually talked about 3 ways we can make online courses more interactive in the HIM field. So the last thing I would like for you to do, our final reflection, is to actually fill out your email one more time. And if you would, take a few minutes before you answer this question. How could you use social, cognitive, and a teacher presence in your online classroom to make them more effective? Once you're finished, you can send that email to me, and if you like, you can add any questions that you may have along with it, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. One thing I look forward to is actually seeing you next Monday for workshop number 2. I did add a page of my references so that you're able to see what I've been using. I used Randy Garrison's E-Learning in the 21st Century for this presentation. Thank you so much.